biggest issue I see with the majority of Cossack squat tutorials on the internet is that the exercises used are just simply regressions and progressions to the Cossack squat itself. Now, if you're a naturally stiff person, if you don't already have mobile and open hips, and you can't even get into the Cossack squat position in the first place, then you're not going to get anything out of these progressions and regressions. I was going through the same thing when I was first searching on how to develop a deep squat. A lot of the tutorials required already the ability to get into the deep squat, to do some of these mobilization type exercises where, say, if you were stuck here, you don't get anything out of them because now you just don't have enough leverage. Same goes with the Cossack squat. If you're stuck here, then you're just not going to have the ability, even if you are assisting yourself, to find the necessary stretch. One, because if the goal is to stretch the adductor on this leg, you're already limited with the squatting leg. For instance, if I held onto this squat rack and assisted myself into the Cossack squat, and I didn't already have open hips and a decent squat, then this is what's going to happen, is I'm just going to shift my center of mass way far back. See how my pelvis is completely tucked under. I'm hardly even stretching the adductors here. And there's no leverage to actually find a good stretch in this leg or even the squatting leg. Okay? If I was to just hold on here for my dear life and then let go, I would just fall backwards. And in this position, this is an active position where I have to hold myself up with the hip flexors and then the hip flexors on this leg. We can't even focus on actually stretching the position. Even if you just supported yourself and went through a limited range, this still isn't enough to break through your stiffest areas, which are holding you back in the first place. The problem with just using regressions of these compound stretches, a stretch composing of multiple different joints, is you're just going to default into your most flexible areas. So say you have good flexible hamstrings, but you don't have flexible adductors, you might only feel this stretch in your hamstrings and really not in your adductors. You're going to need specific stretches for the adductors. And then on the squatting side hip, you might just feel impingement in this front of the hip, and you might need specific mobility exercises to actually develop a deeper squat on this leg, so you afford yourself the space to actually sink into this adductor on this side. So as somebody who got into flexibility training simply because I just wanted to squat more comfortably and specifically achieve the Cossack squat, I'm going to share with you some of the exercises that really helped me, but most importantly, some of the prerequisites you're going to need if you want to start actually focusing on the Cossack squat. Because like I said, maybe a more suitable goal for you would just be to simply develop the deep squat first, so you have the ability to actually get down here, and then you'll be able to kind of kick that leg out to the side and focus on doing the full thing. Prerequisite number one is a wide stance squat to parallel. So we call this the horse stance squat. I'm going to take 5 steps out. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then just turn the toes out. So I want to be able to get my knees out and squat to at least parallel here with this wide stance, about double the hip width. Okay, this is going to ensure my short adductors are flexible enough to sink into that wide stance position and get low in the hips. The next prerequisite you're going to want is to be able to sit in a wide straddle and then an upright torso. If this is how you look, then most likely you're going to need more flexibility in these inner thigh and hamstring muscles, specifically the gracilis, which is an adductor muscle that crosses both the hip and the knee, as well as some of the hamstring muscles specifically. If that's your issue, I do have other videos that are more specific to hamstring flexibility, developing a comfortable forward fold. If you haven't seen those yet, check them out. Lastly, I'll say a nice prerequisite to have is the ability to perform a middle split to a vertical yoga block. Now, I'm not saying the ability to perform these prerequisites are necessary to start training for the Cossack squat, but if you can do all of these prerequisitory positions with somewhat comfort, then you probably have the Cossack squat inside of you and your nervous system just doesn't know how to express it yet. And just with a little bit of practice, you'll unlock it. But for now, let's get into it. I'm going to show you some of the most bang for your buck exercises you can do to unlock these prerequisites. And then eventually, we will integrate some of these more isolated exercises into the Cossack position itself, so we can have some specific practice in the position that we're trying to unlock. Okay, this first drill is the seated Cossack internal rotation. Now, even if you have decent hip flexion, I want you to sit on an elevated surface. So in this case, I'm using a yoga block. Now, we're going to get into kind of a shin box position on the working leg, and we're going to keep this non-working leg straight in as much abduction as we can handle. Now, we're going to take a weight. So I'm using 15 pounds. Start light and then gradually work your way up. When you apply this weight on the top of the knee here, we should feel that internal rotation stretch much more. And I want you to be rotated toward this back foot. Try not to use momentum and rock back. Lift, and back down. We want to get a good squeeze of these external rotators. Okay, so good 3-second hold in the squeeze, 3-second hold in the stretch. Each time trying to rotate more and more toward that back foot. 10 to 15 reps each side, and then we'll superset this with the next exercise. Next, we're going to do a frog internal rotation. So we're going to set up in the frog stretch. Now we want the shins parallel with each other here. From the back, we don't want the feet turned in. We want to keep the shins parallel. Okay, so we're not going to be able to sit back into hip flexion as much, but this is going to allow us to bias that internal rotation at the hip. Now when performing these lift-offs, we want a heavy weight in front to allow us to push up into. This is a bit light. We can go with a little bit heavier, so it's more isometric. But I'm going to pull up on that and then lift. Okay, other side. 1, 2, 3. Sink back into hip flexion. 1, 2, 3. Sink back into hip flexion. Okay, so do one side, about 8 to 10 reps, 3-second hold at the top, and then switch. 1, 2, 3. Okay, what we want to prevent here is rocking forward as we lift. So think about pushing this weight up and away as we lift, as if I'm trying to push it that way. So we can counter the direction of our push from the knee. Next exercise will open up external rotation of the hips in order to give us a more wider stance. So we're going to use a bench to keep ourselves upright, but also to isometrically push against. And then we're going to get into this kind of runner's stance or long lunge, but we're going to bring the foot inward so it's in line with our back hip. Now from here, we're going to push ourselves upright, push the hands into the corner of the bench, and then drop the knee to a target. So in this case, I'm using a yoga block. So drop the knee, and then push through the foot to bring the knee back up here. Don't just use momentum. So we want to use these internal hip rotators to push us out of the position. We also want to try to limit rotation of the torso or just wagging the pelvis to the side to get the knee down. We want to stay as isolated to the femur as possible. Every few reps or so, we can bring the target a little bit lower until we're eventually getting toward the ground. I'm using a bit too much compensation here. Okay, so we're going to perform this one for 12 to 15 reps with a 10-second hold on the last rep in that most externally rotated position. So perform these exercises as a superset for a couple rounds, then retest your horse stance, and you should be much closer to that parallel wide squat. Okay, now we're ready to move on to the straight leg stretches so we can more comfortably sit in this seated straddle. Okay, level 1 of our straight leg hip abduction stretching is going to be a contract, relax, agonist, contract sequence with our leg elevated on a bench or a box. Ideally, we get the leg parallel to the ground, so we're at 90 degrees of hip flexion in abduction here, but start on a bench and eventually work your way up. So we're going to do it in two different positions. First is toes up with a more upright torso, and then second will be toes down with a more folded forward torso. Okay, so first we're going to go toes up. Contraction 1, driving the heel down into the bench. 10 seconds. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Contraction 2, pulling the foot out into external rotation. As I'm doing that, I'm pushing the pelvis forward, getting my torso more upright. I should feel my glute really working hard and my hip rotators, kind of that piriformis area. Okay, now I'm going to relax, turn my toes forward, fold forward, anterior tilt the pelvis, and then I'm going to drive my foot down. 10 seconds. Okay, now contraction 2 is trying to internally rotate. Okay, so I'm trying to pull my heel up. You will see it's barely moving. It's almost like I'm trying to turn my kneecap down, pushing my toes into the bench. 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so I'm just going to do one cycle each, shake it out, and then switch sides. So ideally, we're doing shorter duration contract relax cycles, so just one cycle each, but we're doing more and more sets because you'll be able to get deeper each set you go. For level 2, we're going with an eccentric half split. Now, if you're new to this, use a bit of hand support in front, such as a box or a stack of yoga blocks, so we can actually focus on the stretch and relaxing under load into our deepest half split position. So we're going to slide out under control, sitting the butt back, anteriorly tilting the pelvis. While we're sliding out, we're contracting the adductors. We're contracting the muscles isometrically and eccentrically that we are trying to lengthen, making sure we get a good isometric pause at the end range each rep. So once we're comfortable, we know how to access our deepest position with hand support, then we can go unassisted here. Since this is an eccentric, we don't have to come up out of it and slide our way back up. We can just put our hands on the ground and walk our way back in, reset, and go for another rep. Hands on the hips is going to be a little bit less strenuous. Hands out to the side will be a little bit more load of the body weight going into the groin muscles. And then eventually we use a weight held in front on the chest to overload those muscles even more. We can think of this exercise kind of like a Cossack squat tipped forward and without the need to load the squatting leg. So perform this anywhere from 5 to 8 reps with a 5 to 8 second hold at the end range each rep. Level 3 will be the wall adductor fly, aka the wall middle split. So I've attached a video here showcasing a few different variations for how we can get the most out of this exercise. So we want socks, we want a nice low friction wall. This variation I'm going with just high repetitions, lighter weight, going for a nice pump in the adductors. If you're new to this exercise, low weight, high reps is the way to go. So when we get comfortable with this, we can do some end range partials where we're going down into the deepest stretch and then just lifting maybe a quarter of the way up. So a partial range here. This way we can just focus on that end range, not worry about going all the way to the top. When we're ready to use a bit heavier weight, a good way to progress on this is eccentrics only. So I'm showcasing the same weight here, but this can obviously be heavier, where we go down nice and slow under control, get a pause in that stretched position, and for the most part, we're using a heavy enough weight here that we can't get it back up, concentrically using our adductors, so we need the hand support Lastly, we can go with a static hold, not just passive. We're isometrically squeezing the adductors, squeezing the glutes to pull us deeper. Truth be told, the wall kettlebell middle split was probably the most effective, along with actually training the middle splits in developing my Cossack squat. Okay, lastly, we're going to work on integration. So we've opened up all the individual pieces necessary for the Cossack. Now we're going to educate the nervous system on how to pull ourselves actively into the range by strengthening some of these shortening muscles. So we're going to get into a seated position on a low box or a bench, and then we're going to get into this kind of passive Cossack squat. Have some sticks for some isometric support. We're going to lean forward and then actively try to lift this leg off the ground. So pulling that knee straight, firing the quad, drive the sticks into the ground, lift, 1, 2, 3, down. Lift, 1, 2, 3, down. 1, 2, 3, down. Okay, so we're going to do 6 repetitions on this leg, and then we're going to rotate over to this leg and lift. 1, 2, 3, down, lean forward. 1, 2, 3, down. Okay, so again, 6 repetitions on this leg, and then you'll kind of notice that you're able to scoot forward and get a little bit wider in your seated Cossack. So this is going to transfer over really nicely when we go and practice the skill directly. And last, we're going to pair that short range strengthening exercise with direct practice in the Cossack squat. So we're going to do 2 variations. We're going to do a squat leg elevated, so we're going to elevate on a low box or even a stack of yoga blocks. And this is going to allow us to sink into that full squat on this leg. So it's more of a mobilization for the squatting side hip, allowing us to get low. So we're going to do about 10 repetitions here, and then into elevation of the trail leg. And this is going to give us a much bigger stretch of the adductor on this leg. So you'll notice as we go through 10 reps that you're going to start high, and then eventually you'll be able to get lower and lower. Just allow that foot to come up into external rotation whenever you feel like you need to. Allow the arms to come out in front for counterbalance. Okay, so anywhere from 10 to 15 reps each side, and feel free to add weight in the goblet position. The funny thing about the Cossack squat is a lot of people use it in their warm-up. They say it's a great warm-up drill to do before strength training or even more advanced flexibility work. But in my experience, the Cossack squat was the thing you needed to warm up and actually develop. So not until you unlock the Cossack squat, you'll be able to use it eventually in your warm-ups. Okay, so the Cossack squat program, we're going to perform this twice a week. Now, depending on where your main limitation is, you're probably going to focus on one section more than the other. So say your horse stance is just really limited, maybe you feel really blocked off in the hips, and you don't even feel like you're at a point where doing any straight leg stretching is going to be meaningful at all because you can't even reach the first prerequisite. So in this case, we're going to do 5 total sets of the hip opening series and totally omit the straight leg stuff. So these 3 exercises will help open up the hips to get you closer to that parallel horse stance. Now, if you are at a point where, say, your horse stance is limited, but also your seated straddle, but when you warm up and do some of these exercises, you can get yourself into a parallel horse stance. Now you're in a better position to train straight leg hip abduction stretching. So you're just going to do the lower end of the sets. So you'll do around 3 sets of the hip opening series. And then you'll move on to the straight leg series. With this section, you're just going to choose one exercise depending on your level. So if you're at a point where maybe you could sit on the ground, but your spine is really rounded over and your knees are bent, go with level 1. Because here you could set up the bench or box height to match the level of hamstring and inner thigh flexibility that you currently have. Once you're more comfortable with this end range stretching, contracting the stretching side and the shortening side, we could then move on to level 2, where we're getting a bit more eccentric load dynamically through those adductors and hamstrings. So we're going with the half split eccentric here. Okay, so feel free to use hand support or even additional load held in front via dumbbell or kettlebell. And then level 3, we're going with the wall middle split. Great way to load the adductors through full range. Now, this is level 3 because it does require that 90 degrees of hip flexion with a straight leg. So you should already be at a point where you could sit in a seated straddle upright and maybe even get a bit of forward lean, kind of like a pancake. That's when this wall kettlebell middle split will be more effective. Again, this section, 3 to 5 sets. 5 sets if your horse stance is pretty dang good cold. You don't even need to worry about the hip opening stuff. You could just focus on the straight leg work. Maybe if you want to do 1 or 2 sets of the hip opening stuff for a warm-up, totally fine, but you don't necessarily need to train it. So if you're doing everything in one session, then maybe you're going to do 3 sets of each section, A series, B series, and the C series, which is now the integration. So this is where we tie it all together. So we're going to do the lift-offs, really getting those shortening side muscles strong in that end range of the Cossack position. So we're going to do lift-offs for the straight leg and lift-offs for the squatting leg. And then we're going to pair that with the squat leg elevated and the trail leg elevated Cossack to really ingrain this new range. By the time you get to this integration section, you probably already have the Cossack squat inside you that the nervous system just doesn't know how to express just yet. So therefore, a bit of practice of the skill, once these ranges are opened up, will help you unlock the Cossack squat. There you have it, guys. That's everything laid out for you. These are the exercises and techniques you're going to need to unlock the Cossack squat finally as a stiff person. I know what it's like. The adductors and the hip rotators were very stubborn muscles for me to unlock. The horse stance, the deep squat, I couldn't even get into those positions in the first place to even focus on the Cossack squat. So once you have this Cossack squat unlocked, you'll be able to eventually use it as a warm-up exercise. Hope this video was helpful. What other moves are you guys struggling with? Let me know in the comments. If some of these exercises were helpful on your Cossack squat journey, let me know as well. Till next time, stay supple.